Yo, what is going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Wednesday edition of Wildly Informed. Brett Marshall, joined as always by Isha Jerome, back with you for another episode, talking not only Minnesota Wild today, but we'll talk a little KHL, we'll talk a little CHL, we'll talk a little bit about some other Wild players, some things we've been seeing going on. It should be a jam-packed episode, but as we always do before we get into the good stuff, got to check in. Isha, how's it going? Are you over the cold that you were dealing with last week?
Yes, and I just have to address the chat. You know that I ain't the smartest, the sharpest tool in the shed. So you got to look over these. You got to look over these.
Like the only thing that stinks is like I will truthfully say the only reason I have Twitter Blue is because I make typos all the time and it drives me insane as a grammar nerd. So I bought it once so I can tweet longer things when I'm like trying to explain
My
stuff
bad, guys.
and to edit. But I found out for whatever reason, if you like the minute you start a thread, you can't edit the tweets at all in the thread. It's like threads can't be edited. So like because that one's in a thread, can't.
I caught it on YouTube last minute, and then I was like, "Oh shit, I didn't change it on Facebook."
I didn't notice until Kaylor.
And you know what? I have to say, I have this new old mechanical keyboard, and it's even worse now because I'm just just hammering. As you guys can probably hear in the mic, it's just too easy to type like a crazy person. So
who knows?
My bad.
Maybe return is it becomes this new word about like electric, amazing, incredible. The return of Kirill and Spurgeon. Like,
Hoppy's rolling his eyes, just going, "You're 31 years old. Learn how to friggin' spell."
It's all good.
Man, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk puck. Today was like the literal like fastest day of my life. It felt like I feel like I haven't like caught my breath all day, but it's been like the good kind of busy. So it's not like the stressful kind, which is nice. And talking about hockey is always a good way to kind of wrap it up before maybe a couple of video games and some YouTube before bed. But
there you go. Yeah, no, productive day on my end too. I've just been editing videos for this one client, and hopefully we'll be able to be done before bed. But if not, it's due. We're posting it on Friday, so just need one more. I basically crushed it all day today, so if we can get everything done mostly before bed, we can go over it all tomorrow, and then we're the home stretch for the weekend, because I'm actually going to Mystic Lake for a fight event. One of the feeder leagues in the UFC comes to Minnesota at least like 3-4 times a year, and this is their 200th event, and so many Minnesotans on the card, so many former Gopher wrestlers, so many guys who are like, just this close to the UFC, some local girls and guys fighting for championships. So it's going to be a fun weekend. So I'm trying to get everything done so that Saturday I can just go and watch even the I'm that crazy person who goes there like an hour before the main fights start and just watch like the amateurs, because like I get my money's worth and I just love supporting all the athletes. So
yeah, I mean, it's. I always say too, like people like the afternoon session. This is like a kind of unrelated, but like just the psycho hockey fan that I am. Like same thing with like the state hockey tournament. I feel like some of the like even the games that go at Mariucci are like the Class A semifinal games, which are like usually lower bowl only. Like that's some of the best hockey of the tournaments. I'm like, yeah, I'll go watch those games. I'll go over to Mariucci and watch even some consolation games. It's still good hockey, and I can't get enough of it. So
I feel
I feel that 100%. Like I might as well get my money's worth and watch some good sports.
Yeah, I mean, Hoppy, and well, since I moved here, Hoppy and I've gone to like the second last day, so like the semifinal day, but like we'll stay for all the games. Like,
they're all great. Some of the best hockey of the tournament that day. I think and sometimes it's more fun than the championship games at times.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but that was definitely the case. Whereas like the championship or the like the game that mattered, the last game of the day, was like more of a blowout than even some of the other ones that were more competitive. So there you go. But what do we got coming up on the show today? Because there's only 2 Wild games since the last time we spoke, so we don't have too much to draw from just Wild hockey. But like, there's a lot going on league wide.
Yeah, Wild wise, we'll talk a little bit about. We're gonna revisit Ryan Hartman a little bit. We talked about him, I think, before Christmas, and I just kind of want to reflect back on that show and how we talked about positive regression was coming, and we'll have the stats to kind of back that up and show how that's happened. We'll talk a little bit about Trenyan, who's actually had a really nice stretch offensively here. Maybe that's like flying super under the radar. We'll talk a little bit about the return of Kaprizov, Spurgeon to the lineup, and then we'll talk a little bit too. We're hoping to make a case for David Jiricek to stay up in the lineup. He was put on waivers, so we'll find a way to work some opinions in there just about what we thought out of his 6-game sample up here. Kind of revisit a little bit what that meant last week and what's maybe changed since then. Talk about just kind of and that wild kind of that bottom pairing and those guys all in the mix and what an ideal situation would be. And yeah, like you said, we got a lot of our like just hockey related stuff that's happened. Some of it a little bit wild related, some of it not, but should be fun. And kind of debuting a new segment of sorts to kick off the show.
Yeah, because like we're not just gonna like reach and rag the puck with wild news if there isn't any, or just continue to talk about the same things over and over again. Injuries and how this team has to be resilient to play through them in particular. Yeah, so exactly. If there's a week where there's just not much wild related stuff to draw from or talk about, like if there's league wide headlines, hockey headlines, love the new segment title, then we'll dive into it. And somewhat related to us, I think rightfully bitching and complaining last week, Connor McDavid suspended 3 games, not due to anything that occurred with the Minnesota Wild, but actually with my Vancouver Canucks, which, look, I just want to preface this by saying, look, Tyler Myers is no saint either, okay? Yeah. But everything in regards to what went on with him and Garland, I mean, Team Garland, and even Talkett was saying that he was rolling his eyes as in response to not only the Edmonton Oilers fan base complaining about this, but complaining about the suspension, but also the friggin' Oilers themselves.
Well, and some of their media people are just as bad with it too. It's like
their media folk are actually like more biased than I would say even Toronto and Montreal's. And I got a full taste of that when Vancouver played them in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, like I'm documented online, I think, saying how much I've loathed like Avs, Jets, Stars fans. Oilers fans are a whole new worse I could have never imagined. Like I've probably blocked, I'm not kidding, since the Johansson game, I've probably blocked between 150 and 200 Oilers fans just because they're like, and it's not like none of them want to come, at least like sometimes with like the occasional like division rival fan, like those 3 teams I mentioned, their fans at least know hockey a little bit and want to argue about like actual hockey things. But like these people are just like attack your personality and just like attack, really just like you were the most negative, hurtful people for me saying like McDavid deserved a 3-game suspension. And then I'm unhappy that, the Wild are missing a player because what McDavid did and elbowed the guy in the face. So yeah, like their fan base, they're like the whole team statement, and it's just all like embarrassing. And it's like, I used to like kind of want McDavid to win a cup and like be happy for Edmonton, but like, absolutely, I'm so anti-Oilers, anti-everybody, like everything about that organization now. I'm like, nope, piss off. Like yeah.
Look, I'm not the guy who's like, I don't want McDavid to win a cup, but I could care less at the end of the day. Like I was rooting for Florida last year, Canada's team. Like Crosby was a little bit different. And put it this way, I'll preface it by saying if Crosby was like the same Crosby in his first 3 seasons, just bitching and complaining about everything, then I probably wouldn't even have wanted him to win a cup either. But like once he won one, I was like, all right, like, and then like Alex Ovechkin, obviously I wanted him to win. So like I do want certain great players to get their flowers. Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, right now I really could care less. And I'm that one Canadian fan that doesn't just blindly root for Canadian teams because they don't have the red maple leaf on their jersey, okay? They're NHL teams made up of international players. I could care less where they're located. I ain't blindly rooting for the Canadian team. And I tried making this, I tried making the example that just because you're American and say you're from Minnesota, and let's just say the Vikings didn't make the playoffs, are you rooting for Green Bay because they're American? Fuck no. Right?
Or like Midwest, or even like, no.
You're rooting for Wisconsin because they're American? What? Yeah, absolutely not. Like, so Toronto's my least favorite sports. Toronto Maple Leafs are my least favorite sports team in all of sports. I will never root for them. I hate them more than I love my mother. I don't care. I would chop off my arm if it meant that they would never win a Stanley Cup ever again. Like, I'm not even kidding, right? So like, I don't get this blind like, oh, you gotta root for Edmonton and McDavid because you're Canadian. Fuck that, dude.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's pretty unbelievable that, and like, to have it all fuel, and then for the Oilers to come out and be like, oh no, like we're gonna really help him through this hard time and we support him. Like what? Like the dude's not dying. He cross-checked a guy in the face. Like, you can't do that. It doesn't matter if you two are in a wrestling match before that. Like, if you want to settle it out, like, drop the gloves then, or just like push him, wrap him up. Like, no, like, you chose to cross-check him in the face. Like, there's no justification for it. I don't know what the Oilers are supporting or why they're disappointed by that decision, especially when, as you mentioned, like, Tyler Myers did the same thing, and also got suspended. Like, you should be like, what more do you want at that point?
Yeah, the Edmonton Oilers organization made a statement that they were disappointed with the 3-game suspension,
and that they would support McDavid through this time or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Myers got the suspension. Canucks fans aren't bitching and complaining. You know, it's a little crazy, the response. Like, I understand being upset if your fan base, like, you're losing your top player and obviously you're going to defend your team. I get that 100%. I have no issues with that. It's just like, this is just on a whole other level. And it's like, you're digging yourself, more of a grave, because not only are just like Canucks fans annoyed with you, like, everybody's annoyed with you.
Yeah. It's just, in like, you think almost as a team you want to do the opposite and kind of cool your fans off a little bit on it, but nope, they just decided to add fuel to the fire, and now it's everyone just complaining, and it's all we're going to hear about probably for a while now. But, all of this, like, both the players in that game, nobody injured, but, the one thing is Johansson's still out with a concussion. So
yeah, no. Exactly. And I was even getting into some people on Twitter who were like, oh, watch this in a week, you won't even have a concussion. This is his way just to, like, take a break. And it's just like, I think we addressed this last week. Like, yeah. What are you talking about?
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, Boston and Philly fans are a unique fan base as well. But I feel like they would react even a little less unhinged to this whole scenario.
Yeah, like, Boston I don't hate. I'm just like, I'm sick of them winning like everything. Like, they have all 4 of their major 4 sports teams, at least in my lifetime, have won one, if not multiple championships. Like, Patriots have won multiple, Bruins won multiple, Red Sox I think have won multiple in my lifetime, and then Celtics I'm pretty sure have 2. Like, they've had multiple for each 4 of their teams, and I'm like, I don't want to hear you whining about, oh, my team had a bad year, or, like, the Patriots suck now. It's like, no one cares. Like, you're fine. Stop complaining.
Yeah. So anyways, McDavid got his suspension. It wasn't because of chicken winging friggin' Johansson, but the league actually dished out a penalty, which I guess we can kind of say good job.
Yeah, and the fans are like, well, it should have been 2 games. Like, well, he got 2 for that and then 1 for the elbowing Johansson. They just tacked it on there.
Yo, for those who are watching on X, come over to YouTube so you can so we can further interact with you in our live chat. I only can see your comments, but I can't, like, type back, and we have a good community that we're going here on YouTube as well. All right. Next hockey headline. I actually saw this pop up on Instagram first, and then I verified the source. Now, the source is a small Russian media outlet, but a Russian media outlet nonetheless. And I looked in to see if they were just like a bought Putin media outlet. No, like they actually report sports stories from around the world. And they reported the IHF is going to potentially lift the ban on Russia and Belarus competing in IHF competition. That's according to RIA Novosti. And discussions will be held. There will be meetings held on February 3rd and 4th. So look out for that. We might see as early as the World Championships this summer, and of course the World Juniors next year. We could see Belarus and Russia back in. And furthermore, come Olympic time in a year and a half, we'll see Russia back in it, which as far as like Olympics, I think is going to be awesome because we need to see some of these NHL players in. And I was seeing videos, Brett, of just like, now imagine if this happened, a month or 2 earlier and it was the 6 nations instead of the 4 nations and you added Russia and, say like the Czechs. Dude, Russia's team would be absolutely stacked right now if you look at who's in the league.
Yeah, I think like their goaltending and forwards, I think could be top. I think the blue line is where it gets a little more dicey, but nonetheless, like there's a lot of talent in their Russian forward group, and like this is always kind of a weird subject for me. Like people ask, like, oh, what are your thoughts on like Russia being banned or whatever? It's hockey related, and like I don't have an opinion either way. Like obviously, you never want to condemn when a country is going to war with another country. Like that's never good. Especially just the history Russia has with that. So like that part sucks, but like I don't know what you want Kirill Kaprizov to do about that or what you want 18
or the U20 players who have
like
literally no involvement, and when they like went to war were still like 16, 15 years old.
Yeah, and because they're forced to, it's like mandated to live there, and then if they do, speak out against it, it's very risky. Like we've seen what happened with Artemi Panarin the one time he spoke out against it. Like he had to go home and like protect his family essentially, and like so Ovechkin is like known to like Putin likes him. So you think Ovechkin can come out whether or not he agrees with what's going on and speak out against it? No. So like I don't know what they want the hockey players to do about it. Like maybe outside of Ovechkin, there's no one who they probably even care about enough anyway. Or if they're going to say something bad, they're going to punish him just as they would anybody else. So I think, like you said, I think from a competition standpoint, when we want to watch best on best, that includes the players from those countries. So it'll be interesting to see where those conversations go, and definitely something I want to keep tabs on here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and from like the junior side of things, right? Like Kazakhstan, Latvia, Switzerland, just getting better. Like those lower tier teams, just getting better and better. Okay, where does Belarus now fit into it? Where they always like snuck in and had like a few really good players. I mean, the most notable ones I can remember recently were the Kostitsyn brothers, and they're like in, I think, late 30s, 40s. They haven't been in the league for a while now. But like, okay, who are the next Belarusians coming up? We haven't been able to see. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us in the YouTube chat as well. Scott, by the way, gave out a bunch of memberships during our World Junior streams. So big shout out to Scott for helping support the channel as well. But anyways, I'm very much into international hockey, World Juniors. I mean, that's my shit. So I'm very much going to keep tabs on this, and we'll update you guys if anything comes from those meetings. Another hockey headline that is more near and dear to Minnesota: Danila Yurov, Brett, reportedly turned down a KHL extension, solidifying that he is most likely going to be coming to Minnesota and or Iowa at the end of this season, or, depending on if his team makes a playoff run and, dates lining up, and honestly, cap space as well for the Wild. He might be joining them next year, but I'm truly getting the sense, based on everything that Russo's reporting, based on just like the community at large, that this is his last season in the KHL. Yeah.
Russo kind of fired back on their report a little bit, I think, in a mailbag recently, mentioning he hasn't heard anything yet, but it's always tricky probably with what they can and can't say out loud because of just what can happen. Like we've seen players just get benched for no reason. Yurov being one of them at times. Michkov, I think it happened a couple times. He'd just be like top line, then benched. And so they want to be careful with all that soon. Probably what gets out, because he probably wants to finish out his season there, try to lead his team to another championship. I think he's kind of turned it on as of late too. Like I think the points are coming at a 2-point game over the weekend with some big points in that one. I think he had a goal that tied the game, and then won a face-off in overtime that led directly to a goal. So he picked up an assist. So had a game-winning goal, game-tying goal, game-winning assist in the same game. So
10 goals in 39 games, 22 points. I mean, I don't think he'll hit 50 this year like he did last year, but like he's still having a very productive season. I know he was dealing with some injuries the start of the year as well.
Yeah. So and I think maybe we saw a little bit like the slow start with the points, and I think maybe now as he's continued to get healthier, we're seeing the offense tick up too. So I mean, regardless, this is a player that I think, whereas fans are excited for, I think that the organization is seemingly has in their plan for next year in some way, shape, or form, whether that's the top line or the top 9 or wherever it may be. So, the sooner we can get him over here and just kind of see what he looks like and where he fits, I think the better. But we'll kind of see what happens here as the next couple months go by.
He's one of those guys that you just like, you watch him play in the KHL and you're like, you are too good for this league, which means you're going to be a good NHL player. I mean, look at Michkov, right? Who came in and he's just automatically a star. Now, I'm not saying Yurov's going to come in and automatically be a star, but we had a similar kind of feeling with Kaprizov. Mind you, Kaprizov played longer there and had more time to marinate, and played at the highest level internationally as well. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be Kaprizov, but I have that same feeling based on what I've seen, based on what the scouts are saying, that, there's not going to be a big transition period for him to play well and in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So anyways, here's an excerpt from Russo's last article. Guys, go check it out. It dropped yesterday, his mailbag article. He said the KHL moved its end date back a month. So Khusnudinov's regular season ended February 24th, 2024 with Sochi, while Yurov's ends March 2022 with Metallurg. Then he'll have the playoffs with the team that has won 9 of its last 11 games. The other wrinkle is KHL contracts end May 31st now as opposed to April 30th. So if Yurov's season ends while the Wild's still going, the Wild and Yurov's agent would need to negotiate a release, like what was done with Khusnudinov, which, let's be honest, is a rarity. While one would hope that Metallurg wouldn't stand in his way if he asked to be released early, it's their right to keep him throughout the end of his contract. Remember, too, the Wild are in cap hell, so if regular season is still going on, they'll have to clear up some cap space to sign him. And we're assuming they already plan to sign Zeev Buium when his sophomore season ends at the University of Denver. That's another thing to note as well. So it's just too early to predict if he's going to come over this year. Yurov, by the way, would be a 3-year deal for the first year burned if he signs this season. We're used to that with the NHL players signing college players at the end of the year, and a 2-year deal if he signs starting next season. For the record, despite a report saying he's not willing to sign an extension in the KHL, nothing has been decided from Yurov's camp regarding next season, a source close to Yurov says. Again, and this is just me, I don't think he's going back to the KHL. There's nothing else for him to prove there, especially upon winning a championship last year.
Yeah, and he's even, I think, been pretty vocal about wanting to play in the NHL. Like, I think he said, like, yep, my goal is to play for the Wild in the NHL. Like, he was he was on site for the draft, which, there have been some other Russian players who haven't come over yet that didn't come over for the draft either. And so I think that, like, the excitement's, I think, clear there. And you're into your point, like, he's got a championship there. He's leading a team right now with the potential to head into championship again. Like, yeah, that's great. And, you hope he figures all that out and they can do it again, and then he'll be ready to come over. But his focus right now is probably in the season he's playing, and then the Wild stuff, they'll get sorted out once they kind of know where the end of the season comes. Because I think it's the regular season that ends the 22nd, which at that point there's about a month left in the NHL regular season. So, like, I think it's dicey that we see him at least this season. I think this year, if you're talking about the start of next season, probably more likely than before.
I imagine he'll be here in the summer training. That's what I think.
Or, like, maybe he's kind of a black ace for your playoff run, right? Like, he's with the team, getting around the team. If you need him in a pinch, he's in the lineup or something like that. But
that's a good black ace to have. God damn.
Yeah, which I don't know how that works. I know your salary situation can be a little bit different come playoff time, but
this is a good question, by the way. Are all the players in the Four Nations from the NHL, or will there be players from other leagues? All NHL, if I'm not mistaken, because the NHL is working with the IHF to do this.
Is the IHF have any part of it? I think it's just the NHL, isn't it?
I think the IHL had to clear it. Like, they had to get clearance in
but it's the NHL's event.
Exactly, yeah. So it's not like an IHF event, but
they're the ones profiting off the tickets and the publicity and everything like that.
Well, and the NHL season is halting, and they're not arguing that it's halting like they did with the IOC and the Olympics, with all the insurance and paying families to come over and all that stuff, which, like, thank God they finally came to an agreement on that, because it was just mostly like, I want you to pay for it. No, I want you to pay for it. No, I want you to pay for it. And honestly, as much as I was annoyed that the NHL was not sending their players, I get it. They're just stopping their revenue stream and risking players getting injured, like Tavares did when he broke his leg for Team Canada in Sochi, right? But no, this is very much NHL, and the NHL's halting their season. It's a showcase, and I wish it was 6 nations. 4 nations is kind of weird, but again, Russia is not participating, which again I believe is an IHF thing where it's like, we'll allow this international tournament, but Russia's not involved.
Yeah, well, it's also weird. Like, I think Czechia is good enough where you could have a team. I think there's
100%.
enough. Same with, like, and I think you could probably get one of either Slovakia or Germany. Like, I think there'd be enough talent between those.
I think Slovakia is still over Germany, but, like, yeah, I mean, you could definitely probably swing it.
But it's like weird when you keep marketing as best on best. Like, really, because the beginning of the year MVP favorite is going to be, in Cabo. Like, it's not best on best. It's best on most.
Yeah, best on most.
Or most on most. I don't know however you're gonna word it, but
yeah, because like without NHL players, Germany was getting silver at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Without even Draisaitl. So like it is a decent, budding hockey nation. But I mean, like the freaking UK was like beating teams as well. It's like, all right, guys, calm down. What about Team Zuccarello in Norway? Norway just doesn't have the depth. It's kind of like Switzerland too. There's some good Swiss players, but they just don't have the depth.
Two former Wild 22s, Fiala and Niederreiter, I think, are both Swiss.
There you go. Yeah, like there are some actually like really good Swiss players in the league. I mean, Roman Josi, he's Swiss as well, right? Yep. I think a lot of people, Matteo, think that I just teased him because he thought he was Swedish, but no, he's Swiss as well. He's Swiss as well. But no, good question, Evolve MTG, and love the profile picture, by the way. Okay, last thing that we're going to talk about before we get into the analytics agenda and then puck your opinions and continue with the Wild talk, but. This was very interesting, guys. This was very interesting. I'm just going to play a quick clip from Sportsnet, and then I'll bring up Rick Westhead's tweet as well. Because for a lot of you who don't know, the junior hockey landscape, both in the United States and Canada, is about to change. It's about to be shooken up. We'll get into why here in a moment. But this piece of news just hit today.
Story we've been following since the change to the NCAA rules. We knew there'd be changes on the landscape. Earlier this week, the Ontario Hockey League voted to allow and bring in 2 USHL teams, Muskegon and Youngstown, as soon as next season. However, according to International Ice Hockey Federation rules, USA Hockey has to approve that. And this week, in writing, USA Hockey indicated it would not. So the OHL is willing to accept the teams. USA Hockey has not approved their transfer. So it's kind of in limbo right now. We don't know yet where it's going to go, but that's where it stands, Ron.
So interesting stuff here, Brett. Interesting stuff. And just for some context, the Wenatchee Wild were part of, I think, the USHL at one point. Then they came over to the BCHL for a couple years, built up the organization, and then actually were able to enter the WHL. I believe it was last year or maybe the year before. So this isn't out of like left field. We've seen Junior A clubs join the CHL before, and that's the most recent example. But Rick Westhead, who's an unbelievable, and he's the best sports investigative journalist in Canada, and just because he's in Canada, obviously his focus is on hockey first and foremost. He tweeted out this as well, saying basically the same thing that was reported by Elliot Friedman there. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Brett? And how do you think this is going to shake up the landscape here?
Yeah, well, a big reason a lot of this is happening, I think, which is the other wrinkle here, is a lot of reason there's a lot of this movement now in the CHL and stuff is they're going to start losing players to the NCAA because there was a lawsuit I think that Isha talked about over the summer on one of your other shows, basically where the NCAA used to recognize the CHL as a professional league. So if they played there, because technically there's like stipends involved with them getting places to stay and stuff getting paid for, and the NCAA is like, nope, can't do that. So now you're not eligible to play in our leagues. That got overruled. So now a lot of younger players, because the CHL is typically, I think it's mostly like 16 to 18-year-olds, and they have sometimes exceptional statuses for younger players. So once they finish the CHL, they can go up to like 20, but now some of those kids might play 1 or 2 years, go over to college hockey, and then from there, hopefully into their NHL, AHL careers, wherever it ends up being. But so that's kind of at the heels of that argument. Now there's these teams that are just trying to get out of the USHL into the CHL, and all these different things. And this is a big wrinkle in it. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I hadn't looked too much into it until today. I've heard of kind of the news of what was going on. So, the lawyer that they have for this case, that Youngstown and Muskegon have, like it's guy's got a pretty big history with the NFL Player Association, Tom Brady, Megan Rapinoe, like some really high profile stuff. So this is probably going to be a tough battle, but I'm really curious to see where it goes, because I think it opens up a whole can of worms that, both leagues might have troubles dealing with.
Yeah. So essentially there was a young man who was going to play, I believe it was like Division 3, right? Like he was going to play Division 3 college hockey. He had every intention to go there. He was accepted to the school and everything, but like right before the season, this was the start of this season, his eligibility was revoked because they found out that he played a few preseason games with with an OHL team. And again, Division III guys, like, you know, it was crazy. So he decided to open up a lawsuit and sue the NCAA for this. And they basically folded and we're like, you know what, this isn't the first time we've dealt with this and we're not going to win this case. So let's work with the CHL and actually start opening up the doors here. What my gripe with this was, and you know what, after the show, I will link the episode of the podcast in the description of the video and I'll comment it so you guys can just see the full rundown of it because it was pretty detailed and I went through a ton of different examples of international players. You know, there's some players who are currently playing for, I believe there's one guy for University of Denver. I believe there's a guy, a goalie for Boston College, if I'm not mistaken, who've played, literally have played pro hockey overseas, yet are allowed to play NCAA, but CHL players weren't allowed to play NCAA because they get a per diem to eat, you know, it was like not even $100 like every couple of weeks, right? And, you know, get things paid for. And I do want to say that part of the CHL, just something that the CHL does is they do allow kids to go play or go to college. And basically how it works is like if you play 1 year CHL, they'll like cover like, I think it's like a semester or a year of school if you like don't go pro hockey and you know, decide to go to school after. And if you play like your 3 to 4 years in the CHL, they'll cover all of your college again if you don't go play pro hockey, or if you do go play pro hockey and then like decide, you know, like ECHL, AHL, you don't have a future in and do go to school, you do earn those like essentially like college points where like they will pay your tuition. So I believe that, you know, that's going to be shaken up as well. Cause I've even known, I even went to school with people who are like, oh yeah, I played like 2 years WHL, 3 years WHL, who are like, we're in 25, 26 and, you know, played a year pro in the ECHL or 1 year overseas. And then, you know, realized quickly that like, I'm not going to have a career in hockey, come back and like the CHL actually honors that and helps pay for their schooling. But for those who don't know the details of it, the CHL, like Brett said, keyword expressly considered a professional league by the NCAA, largely because players with NHL contracts can be loaned back to the league. That's not necessarily going to be the case anymore moving forward in how the NCAA looks at the CHL. So the new rule would enable prospects who participate in major junior ice hockey or on professional teams to retain NCAA eligibility as long as they are not paid more than actual and necessary expenses as part of that participation. So they're kind of saying now, okay, yeah, you know, you need money to eat, you need, you know, X, Y, and Z, but anything more, London Knights paying guys cash under the table, that's not going to fly anymore. As per Flow Hockey, this ruling comes on the heels of the legal challenge filed earlier this year by the Canadian player we talked about. This ruling will not go into effect until August 1st, 2025. They will not be able to play until after that date in college, which means the earliest any of these players can compete in the NCAA is next fall. Players could potentially enroll in school early if they wanted to. Now, any CHL player that is already under contract with an NHL or European professional team that has received more than the expenses will not be eligible to play in the NCAA. That number has not been disclosed as far as I could find. The professional contract that includes compensation over and above what is allowed in the NCAA would not allow a player to maintain eligibility to compete in the NCAA, which I'm very much curious what the fuck this number is. So I'll continue to dig and look for that. The huge question that will be watched closely by the USHL, BCHL, CJHL, and many more junior A leagues in terms of how this impacts them is, will a lot of these lower, for lack of a better term, lower tier teams in junior A just fold or try to, like in this case, Brett, just run to the CHL? Because you got to imagine that, like, outside of like Penticton V's in the BCHL, who are like one of the best BCHL clubs, Victoria Grizzlies, you know, those are two big ones off the top of my head, in the BCHL, who constantly are pushing guys to the NCAA. Like, it's tough for these small town, lower end USHL teams and BCHL teams, shoot AJHL teams, because even outside of friggin' the Brooks Bandit and like Okotoks in the AJHL, I mean, shoot, man, I can't even name all the AJHL teams. It's that like you don't see these guys go Division I often, or if you do, they're all going to Omaha, which is hilarious that like half of Omaha's team are from Calgary. But I digress. So the USHL has for a long time been a hotbed of top American players on the college track, while leagues like the BCHL, OJHL, AJHL have been top choices for Canadians who are looking to stay NCAA eligible. This kind of blows the doors wide open, and it's going to be interesting after this summer to see like what happens with Junior A, not only in the United States but in Canada. Now, I think like the NAHL will still like do its thing, because again, you're not pushing too many kids Division I. If anything, you're pushing guys to the USHL or to Canadian Junior A, and that's kind of the same with like the AJHL and the OJHL and like the Manitoba Junior Hockey League and things like that. Like the BCHL and USHL are the two top Junior A leagues, and it's just going to be interesting to see what happens to them. I hope they continue, but like they might be like cut in half as far as like the teams, especially if the CHL jumps on this opportunity, and collects their like entry fee from some of these teams and grows in that sense.
Yeah, I think like a big picture way to look at it really quickly to me is it's just really cool for all the athletes and the players. Like this is basically opens the door for opportunity for these kids not only to progress hockey careers, but also continue to pursue education and like not let any of that be a hindrance for your path to the NHL. It's great from a player standpoint.
And for NCAA clubs, who aren't always, ranked, right? Like this is an opportunity for like lower NCAA Division I clubs to be like, holy crap, we can actually maybe compete now because we're bringing in CHL guys.
It vastly expands the amount of players they can recruit is the long story short. Like there's going to be more teams. There's going to be more players. The NCAA is going to expand because of this. And, and to your point, the reverse effect of that is why are these teams expanding? And they have to come from somewhere. And where they're coming from is these teams that, like you said, could potentially fade to nothing when there's just not a influx of players the way there used to be because so many of them are leaving.
Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see the landscape of Junior A hockey in the United States and Canada moving forward. I think like the CHL is just licking their chops because they're just like, we're going to get more probably teams join us, and we're not going to butt heads with the NCAA anymore. We're going to work alongside them, which again, I think is a blessing and a curse. And I'm very much in the middle on if I like this or if I dislike it. What I do like is like going back full circle to the case of that Canadian player. I do like how now it's not going to be a hindrance for these guys to just go and play college, whether it's D1 or D3. If they played a freaking preseason game with the CHL, it's give these guys an opportunity to get an education, outside of Canada's U Sport, because I mean, Division III NCAA is still probably better than half the freaking U Sport teams in Canada. U Sport being Canada's NCAA. But yeah, it's crazy times, like very new times for junior hockey and college hockey, north and south of the border.
Yeah. So how does this affect the Wild or anything? It doesn't really right now, but it might be a better way to see your prospects play against better competition and more often and more visible with playing for either CHL, NCAA, wherever it ends up being. So
yeah, we're hockey nerds, so like when we saw this, we were like, all right, we got to talk about it, which is why we wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. But speaking of the Wild, let's get to some Wild talk here and jump to the analytics agenda.
All right, so not a too deep a dive in anything today, but we did want to talk a little bit. We're seeing some new line combinations coming out for the game tomorrow night because Kirill Kaprizov and Jared Spurgeon are returning to the lineup. So awesome to see, first and foremost, that two of the team's most arguably important players this year. I think I would say it's two of your top four. The way the teams perform with those guys in the lineup, and Kaprizov and Spurgeon coming back, huge boost. Both offensively and defensively, you're getting your best defensive defenseman back, and you're getting your best offensive forward back. Like I think we're going to see, and this team was already grinding out. I think in the time that at least Kaprizov's been out, they have a winning record. So to get into that, to get to this point now, to bring those guys back, we saw a really good game against the Avs over the weekend. And And so like it makes you really excited to see those guys come back. And naturally we got some new lines because of that. We'll talk about the defense in a little bit, but the lines that were in practice today, reuniting Kaprizov, Rossi, Zuccarello, I think that makes a ton of sense. Like they've been one of the best lines in hockey this year when they've been together. And like in my head, it feels like Zuccarello hasn't been as noticeable. I think he's still over a point per game since Krell's been out. But I'm excited to see just those two back on a line together because it's just fun to see the plays that they can make together. So I'm excited to get that first line back intact.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you said there, it's crazy that the team has a winning record. Now they haven't been winning in the most beautiful fashion, all right? But like a win's
and
a win.
The losses have been bad.
Yeah, and the losses have been bad, but a win's a win, points are points, and that's what you fight tooth and nail for in this league. And to get basically the guy who scores pretty much every game for you in Kaprizov back is a huge.
Yeah. So really excited for that. The one spot I was really curious to see what would happen was the second line. Obviously with Johansson out, we saw Ogren in that spot earlier this year, or at least tried it in preseason a little bit. That's where we thought he maybe should have slotted in. He's coming off a nice 2-point game the other night. So I was wondering, would he slide in there with Boldy and Eck, but they actually keep Ryan Hartman there, which I think is actually a really smart play. It's a little bit of our analytics segment today, but like we talked just before Christmas, like people were asking like, oh, Hartman sucks. He's got to be demoted. We need to be traded. What a horrible contract, all this stuff because he's not scoring. And you and I talked on that show, like, I like the eye test. Yeah. Does he look not as good some nights? Maybe a little bit, but a lot of the numbers were there suggesting he was going to come back around, and he has 12 games basically since that podcast. He's third on or fourth among the Wild forwards in goals, fourth in assists, fourth in points. Got 8 points in the last 12 games. Probably could have had a couple more the other night in Colorado. He had a great setup to Jiricek. I think he might have had a post in that game. Like he has 8 points and probably could have 4 to 5 more. He's shooting the puck a lot again. We're seeing now he's actually has more goals than expected in that span. So he's got 3 goals on 2.9 or 2.69 expected goals. So there's that regression like in plain sight. And then play driving wise, compared to the rest of the forwards, he's been one really driving, pushing play. So I think it makes sense to keep him in that spot now, to have him with Eck and Boldy, because now all of a sudden you have 2 lines you can roll confidently. Boldy's really come on as of late. I think I was looking today in that same 12 game span. I think he has 24 individual high danger chances. So 2 a game basically. So now to have 2 scoring lines again, when you've been scraping by with 1, will be nice too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. we honestly should do a study on this with the analytics. Honestly, full beard Hartman is much better hockey player than cleanly shaved Hartman. I mean, I'm sure the analytics suggest that as well.
That's hashtag grit. That's what that is.
You know what's funny? Sorry to bring it back to like fight leagues and stuff. There's a fight league in British Columbia that has a stat in their like tail of the tape called grit percentage. And I always message them like, how the fuck do you measure grit percentage from your fighters? And they're just like, yup. I'm like, okay.
Like, we don't know either.
It's just something we thought would make us look smart, but okay.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I think it's a good start. And I think the other positive of that, is Liam Ogren staying in the lineup, because I was wondering, do they go back to a Ben Jones and a Devin Shore now and get Ogren back in the top 6 minutes? It's like, yeah, we could, but they're keeping him on the third line. They're going to put him with Gaudreau and Foligno, and that line scored, I believe, twice the other night.
I don't mind that, by the way, because like Gaudreau's kind of hybrid. Well, he's got speed. He can actually set up plays, right? Like he's skilled enough. And then you got Foligno who's going to create space and do his thing, and who can, join the rush if needed, and has, skill as well. So I actually really like that. Yeah.
And I think the good thing with putting up Foligno is I think he plays away, I think similar to, I think how they envision Ogren, like maybe it's a little bit more offense and a little bit less of the defense, but being that guy that can play 200 feet, can be the big forward. I mean, we knock Foligno for not scoring, but the guy does have a crazy effective rate when he does score. Like, he does know how to get to those dirty areas. I mean, such a leader to have on your line. And he's been a guy, he's shown all year, no matter who he's with, he can keep his expected goals up and help control the play. And that's good where you can put a rookie in that spot, because you're then putting in position to succeed. Like, hey, you're going to get tough minutes, but this guy knows how to work through them. Like, he's going to be on your line. I think there's a lot of value in that. Put up 2 points on that line the other night. So it's shown he can work with it. So I thought, the first game in Nashville was a little rough. I think he was a -4 in that game, but then to come back and then have that game against the Colorado Avalanche, and be a part of a line that was so successful in that game. I mean, there's a lot to like, and I'm excited to see just, does adding him now to that third line with, as you said, a very solid player in Gaudreau and a play driver like Foligno, all of a sudden maybe now even give you a tertiary scoring line versus, the one you've had for the past 12 games.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's clear in his play that like the confidence is there from him just ripping up the AHL.
Yeah, that's good, right? And it's the exact reason when they sent down at the beginning of the year, we're like, you know what? Yep, that's fine. We've seen what it did for Boldy. We've seen what it did for Rossi. And, by the end of the season, when we've talked about, is it a Brock Besser or Brock Nelson or someone on the second line, that rental forward, maybe it's their own rental. And that's, Liam Ogren's ready because they developed him the proper way this season.
Yeah. I mean, rentals are always tough. They either work out very well or they don't work out at all. Right. And I mean, Minnesota Wild fans know that too well.
Martin Hansel.
I was just going to say, goddamn hands.
Yep. So, and then that leads to a really solid, fourth lines that have been this year, 3 Iowa players. You now have Yakov Trenin, Marat Huzadinov, and Jacob Lauko. Like, that's a fourth line that you can feel a lot more confident in getting out there to start the year. And initially when I saw this, I was like, oh, great. This can be, if you want your third line to be, spend a little more time in the offensive zone with Ogren, this can be your defensive line. And then as I was looking up kind of those Hartman stats, a player I saw like almost ranking in the similar spot to him was Trenyon. The offense is picked up, like his splits from the games he played up until he got hurt to the games he's played since returning from that injury are like night and day. So 29 games before he got hurt, 13 since then, same amount of goals in both spans, 2 more assists, 2 more points in almost half as many games. And then everything else across the board, his individual chances, his high danger chances, individual expected goals, his play driving metrics offensively, they've all gone up, like nearly doubled in most cases in a 13 game stretch compared to a 29 game stretch. So, and I think Huzadinov, as I think we talked about last week, has looked like he's taken a step up and maybe getting a little more comfortable offensively, playing some better hockey. And then you have Lauko back, the guy who can be your puck carrier, the 2-way player. Like, it gives you a fourth line you can feel a little more confident in than the Ben Joneses and Devin Shores, all due respect to them.
Who are AHL players, like you said, with all due respect.
I think that line scored like once in like the last like 20-some games.
Yeah. And they produce in the AHL. They're just one of those guys who are just like, they just can't get it done. They're patchwork players.
Yeah, and they filled in admirably. Like, they didn't get shredded in their minutes more often than not. They were fine, so they did their job. But now it's going to be cool to see an NHL caliber fourth line that, I'm not saying they're going to score a goal a night, but maybe 1 out of every 4 games this line can chip in a goal. And I really like the way Trenyon's played lately. I think since he's come back from injury, he's looked like a different player to me. Like, all the things we knocked down early in the season with just like not getting those dirty areas and maybe not being this hard on pucks or taking poor penalties, like all that to me is kind of faded. And then you just the sprinkle on the cake that he's the one that went and punched out Lajero's face in, like, and not just like it wasn't even scrap, like he literally kicked the shit out of the kid.
Dude, he wanted this wasn't just like this is a code hockey fight. This was like, fuck you, I'm going to beat you up,
the brakes off of you. And he did. Like, I don't know if the kid landed a fight, which, hey, at least he had the willingness to step up and fight either Trenyon or Foligno, because like
and he knew he knew he was gonna have to, and like
still fuck him as a player, but respect that he at least answered for it. But that was the bare minimum.
I love this sport so much because of that shit, Brett. Like, when what, like, I put it this, I'm sorry, Vikings fans, but me just being like kind of the dick I am, went on Twitter and was just after the Vikings lost and was just like, what kind of sport is this? They're not even allowed to fight. Just because you're not allowed to fight doesn't mean it's not a sport. I'm like, all right, okay, whatever, guys. Yeah. No, and again, I think people forget too that Trenyon's point, or his career high in points, was 24 points in 80 games, and he also the following year got 24 points in 77 games. His highest goal output was 17. Like, he's too late for that this year. He's not going to get that. But, based on what he's at now, 42 games in, what do we got? Like 35-ish more games to the
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Like he could get up to close to 20 again. And like, that's what they signed him for. Right. So yeah, it's been inconsistent, but like if this second stretch he can make up for it, then let's go.
Yeah. And I think like before, like we had said, like the defense is great, but we need that turn into offense. And I think we're finally starting to see that second layer of Trenyan now, where now you're kind of going, now I see why we paid this guy $3.5 million because he's looking a lot more like that player now than maybe the 2 million, 1.5 million he was looking at. This is as a
rookie contract still, still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Like he was looking more like a Lauko and now he looks more like a Foligno, I think is kind of like what's happened. Like both are great to have on your team. You'd rather have two of one versus the other.
Yeah. And you know what, like I almost feel like dirty saying this, but like if the Wild extend Kuznetsov and even if it's just a bridge contract, but like very low dollar amount, and he like again starts to get it as we are seeing him, develop before our eyes in the National Hockey League. Imagine he pops and we get him for like 2 years just at like a stupid bargain, and he's just that like fourth line playoff guy that like Devontae Smith-Pelly and Jay Beagle were for the Capitals in their run.
Who was the guy that fucked over the Wild that was on? He was like a fourth liner. He got a hat trick in Game 7. I think he plays for Dallas now. I think he might have played for Vegas at the time. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, like. Not Matsi Marat's going to be a Game 7 hat trick hero or something.
No, but like if you can
get that type of
gamer,
like to the point, I can't even remember the guy's name.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't Jimmy Benn or whoever. It wasn't Mark Stone. That it was just some random fourth line guy.
I always say it. The Capitals got over the hump that was the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2017 because of Jay Beagle's faceoffs and Devontae Smith-Pelly just going full on psycho mode and he only had like a few minutes a night, but like he made the most of every second. And I swear, like 2 years later, out of the league.
Yeah. Joel Kiviranta was the guy who did it to the Wild.
Kiviranta, yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
he didn't do it against the Wild. I think he did it against Colorado, but still, he was a fourth liner that did that too. So
yeah. So I mean, fingers crossed. But anyways, let's get to the final segment of the show. Puck, your opinion.
I just want to say, Puck, your opinion.
Yeah. So originally, we were hoping when we were kind of planning this out that at this point the Wild would have made a decision on what to do with David Jiricek, who had a really nice stretch of games since our last show. I think he had one of the few goals in the Nashville game, and then in a really good game against Colorado the other night. Playing alongside Declan Chisholm. So our original argument was we got to keep him up in the NHL, but now it's, I think, in a perfect world, if you could build out your dream third pair, salary cap, non-vibing, what is it? And I think, a couple weeks ago, maybe that's Merrill Bogosian or Merrill Chisholm. I think now, for me, it'd be a Chisholm Jiricek.
Yeah.
With both, Bogosian and Merrill down as the 7th and 8th guys. Because these last two games just showed you something that you're not getting in those guys. Like, were some of the defensive hiccups big? Yeah. Like it reminds me a little bit of Dumba, right? Where there are sometimes boneheaded plays defensively where you like slam your head against the wall. But that early career Dumba, like the pre-injury, but you traded that off for electric offensive plays and a defenseman that can just instantly break a game open. I think you saw elements of a little of that from him. And then, that's twice now he played with Chisholm, both times in those Avalanche games. Numbers look really good. Small sample, 21 minutes of ice time to go off of. But in those 21 minutes against a division rival Avalanche, 65.5 attempt Corsi share, 61.5% shot share, 87.3% expected goal share, no goals against, 1 goal for, 0 high danger chances against. Like, those are pretty good numbers. Again, small sample, but there's something to like there. And I think it's two talented offensive puck moving defensemen where you now look, we have a Faber Middleton, a Spurgeon Brodin, and now you have a third pair that can also achieve some of that puck moving that you're absolutely not getting in Merrill and Bogosian.
No, Bogosian is stay at home and you can lean on him because he's been in the league for a while.
Yeah.
It's like a grizzled vet. but like his blunders are big. And I think also it's starting to be like, just kind of like, he doesn't have that youth factor anymore. Like he's becoming a grizzled vet in the league because he's had some hard minutes. He's played a lot. He's played for a while now too, and he's had tough minutes with other teams. And we're just seeing like his reaction time's not as big anymore, or is not as quick anymore. He was never that fleet of foot. He was never a fast puck mover or anything like that. Whereas Chisholm, like, again, I wouldn't say he's two-way. I definitely say he's more offensively inclined, but like he is way more two-way savvy than that of Merrill. He is, way more two-way savvy than some of these guys, even that the Wild have drafted and developed, or trying to develop in Iowa right now. And Jiricek, I mean, he was drafted in the first round for his offensive abilities, and this version of Jiricek has looked the most comfortable in the National Hockey League so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, if anything, like for him, they have to be like, hey, like, you were up here for 6 games. We loved what we saw, like, for literally salary cap reasons, because we'd rather have you playing than as our 7th defenseman. We're going to send you back down, keep crushing it. The next time we need a call up, you're our guy again. Right. Like, I think, and I would hope that's the takeaway. It sounds like Hines spoke pretty highly of him, I think, in the last Russo article that I read. So hopefully that communication's good, because like, I think the flip side of it is, in his head, is like, I just played a really good stretch of games and I'm getting rewarded by getting sent down. Like, understanding, like, no, we love what you did. Salary cap, the business reasons, we got to send you back.
Yeah,
down.
And we didn't start the year with you. We acquired you, right? Like but I'm getting the sense that he understands and that he actually really likes the organization. Shout out to Fellowship of the Rink. You guys can check out the full episodes on this YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts from, on the Sota Pod, podcast feed, and or the Fellowship of the Rink podcast feed. We actually have a couple teaser clips here, as David Jiricek is going to be on next week's episode alongside Hoppy and athletic writer Joe Smith, and he actually talked a little bit about his time with the Wild and the locker room. Check it out.
Who surprised you as far as their personality on the team? Like, you didn't know them very well and you came to a new team. Was it like a Middleton or anybody that kind of stood out? Like, hey, this guy's just a fun dude. I mean,
we have a pretty funny group here. I mean, a lot of guys are pretty funny. Like Zuki, Flowers, great. Midzi, you said, Balls. So a lot of young guys too, like Marat, Trenny, Marco. So I mean, we have such a good group here, and it's always fun to come to the rink and have practice, have games, and compete together.
And so for those who are exclusive members of the channel right now, we posted the interview early. You guys get early access. We posted today. It will drop next week. He also, Brett, reacted to Trennan's goal, and he just already seems like just like one of the boys here, and is just and was welcomed in with open arms with the group as well. That
pass he made to Trennan for the goal. What did you see? I know you've been aggressive offensively, and I know you can you like to be up in the play, but did you kind of play on that, or how did you see him coming and kind of knew that? How did you kind of see that play develop?
Yeah, I saw him coming. I'm just went down the wall and I saw him coming because I had the puck on my backhand, so I'm just gave it to him. It was kind of relief for me because I was in the middle of all my backhand, so. He was in a great spot, so I'm just gave him the puck and he shoots and scored. So that was a great shot too.
Yeah, and I think it says one. I think you look at what he was unhappy with in Columbus, with not feeling like he belonged, thinking he had a spot when he didn't, lack of communication, and you go from that to what sounds like a really clear plan from Billy Guerin on here's what we're going to do with you, here's the plan. Spelled it out, and then to come up and I think on the Wild end to hey, this this is a guy that is going to be up and down, but you make him feel like part of the team right away. And we've talked about for that culture that Foligno and Spurgeon and before that Dumba and now Eck and the captains like Kaprizov make that locker room. And you look at just dysfunction in some of these bad teams around the league, they're not tight the way the locker is for the Wild. And this mentality that the vets aren't superior. It's we're all one team here. Like I think that that plays just as much into it. I think is the management communicating the plan is like, okay, the management's communicated the plan and the team's bought into me too. Like that's such a huge confidence boost for a young kid.
And to have the amount of now NHL depth that the Wild have with young guys and even veterans is a tremendous problem to have, especially when the injury bug comes crawling.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's a good problem to have now. Like when you're talking about, hey, when healthy, like one of, Merrill or Chisholm, Bogosian, Dermott can't play, like sweet. Like that's a good problem to have, right? So
yeah, well, and maybe you can eventually move on from like the Bogosians and Merrills, and Dermott if Jiricek is going to be that guy if they keep Chisholm, and of course with Zeev Buium coming, like Brian said in the chat.
Yeah, so I think if you're the Wild, if you're a fan, like you just have to be excited that your goal when you have a call up is to have someone call up, look the part, fit in, and not skip a beat for your team. And I think that's kind of what you saw with Jiricek this time around. So you can be excited that like, hey, it didn't look like he wasn't ready yet. Like he showed signs of like, yeah, this I can see why I made this trade. I can see why we should be excited about this player.
Well, I mean, they literally gave up nothing to acquire Chisholm, and they essentially gave up nothing to acquire Jiricek in the grand scheme of things. So like just these two young, really good puck moving defensemen just kind of fell into the Wild's lap, which is like, that does not happen in this league. So like, that's insanely fortunate.
Yeah. I think Chisholm's going to be, he's going to be a top 4 defense. Like whether it's a 6 after being a 6 next year at the Wild, like I think he's just going to be that number 4 defenseman that you always forget the name of, but it's like, oh yeah, that guy's always just like really solid. Like Chisholm is going to play a long time.
Yeah. Well, who knows Spurgeon's future with his injury,
right?
And how much longer he's going to play too. So it's like, again, it's going to be interesting next year because like Spurgeon's still playing, even though he's kind of a Band-Aid now. But like, if Chisholm, Chisholm could be his replacement in the top 4.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting because you're going to have a debate that comes down to Chisholm, Bogosian, and potentially Zeev Buium. Like you're looking at, a couple potential options there, and it's, what do you believe in? And I guess Jiricek
in the immediate, by the way, guys, we're not talking about, you're not picking Bogosian over Zeev. That's not what Brett's saying, but we're talking like in the immediate, especially with this team goes on a playoff run, right?
Yeah, and Bogosian's still under contract too, so it's you have to have that conversation with him now. It's hey, now you're the number 7 defenseman, like probably not what he signed up for when he signed on for year 2 or 3 of that deal, right? So those are the things I think that can be forgotten about, but I think it's a good problem to have when you're talking about who's your 6 between next year, potentially Chisholm, Buium, and Bogosian. Like that's a lot better than Merrill, Dermott, Bogosian.
Oh yeah, well, I think teams like Merrill, he's going to be hard to move. Let's just say, but Bogosian, teams are still attracted to the way he plays, mostly because he's a big defenseman in the NHL, right? Yeah. So the Brian Burke mentality, where like if push comes to shove, he might not be happy, but like you could move a Bogosian to a playoff team or whatever, right? So like I'm less concerned with that more than just like we still got Merrill on the books.
Yeah, well, Merrill's off after this season, so this is it for him. So which to his credit, I think last year compared to this year, he's looked a lot better. He still has. It's not like he's been a revolutionary, like, oh, this is a stable 6-pair guy, but
we're not complaining every night about him. Whereas I feel like we were every single night last year.
I actually thought his game the other night against Colorado was phenomenal. Like he had so many nice plays on the penalty kill with getting in the right spots, getting pucks cleared, physical plays down low. Like it's like, oh yeah, like this is the John Merrill I remember, like kind of that year 1 when he really popped off. So it's been good to see at least glimpses of that at times, even if it's 1 or 2 good games out of every 6 or 7. Like I'll take that over like the 1 in 20 we got last year.
Yeah, just the black hole of turnovers. My God. But yeah, and then the last thing is like, what did they do with Dermott? I mean, I feel like they signed him because they needed bodies back there because of the injuries, and now again with Chisholm now playing a ton of minutes with Jiricek in the fold, it's like, hey, you are our safety net. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think he's gonna be a Wild for.
He's the 7th until Brodin comes back, and they need to make space, and they'll be, hey, thanks for your help and good luck. Hopefully, like I think his numbers here have been a little bit better than when he was in Vancouver, so maybe that helps. A team that's like, hey, if he buys into our defensive system, we can get a little bit more out of this guy.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, that's the thing. Him and Bogosian, movable players still, right? Teams can bring them on. It's not going to break their bank, and they can be those patchwork guys who maybe, like you said, teams get more out of them. So yeah, it's the Wild on the back end, man. They never seem to have a problem with players on the back end, and it's just like with Zeev, I don't even want to say likely, like he will be a Minnesota Wild after the college season. Like, it's just so exciting that even with some aging guys in Brodin and Spurgeon, like the future is so bright for this Minnesota Wild back end. It's insane.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. Well, that's all we got, ladies and gentlemen. Brett, what do you got coming up on your blog? And tell us about your player cards as usual.
Yeah, player cards still been getting a little bit better, but getting those up after games here, as long as the games that go to later, depending on what my schedule looks like. But getting those out, recapping the games a little bit, look into the numbers and how they performed. Newsletter, I'm going to be honest, totally forgot about it this week. Just the days passed. I was like, oh, shoot, forgot to write it this week. But I'll have something good cooked up for next week. If you haven't read my Goaltending is Voodoo one, and I have Proof one yet, I encourage you to read that. I spent a lot of time on that one. It was pretty fun. Just looking into how hard the goaltending position is just overall. So we'll find something good. If you have ideas for things you want to see talked about, send those to me over on X, and I'll definitely carve it in there somehow. So
there you go. As always, check out all the content that we post on this YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook or X, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers. Big shout out to Mateo. Big shout out to who's editing a lot of the videos for us. Big shout out to Hoppy, Z, Joe Smith, all of our friends at the MNCAA podcast as well. If you are just more of an audio guy, that's cool too. Check out the Sota Pod audio feed wherever you get your podcast from. Monday, we have a Gophers podcast and just Big Ten NCAA coverage. Tuesday, Judd's Buds, Hoppy and Spoke Z. Wednesday is Fellowship of the Rink, Hoppy and athletic writer Joe Smith. Thursday, NCHC and St. Cloud and Duluth Bulldogs in particular coverage. And then Friday, we drop this via audio on the feed as well. So 5 days out of the week, every weekday, there is a hockey podcast dropping for you guys, both on the channel and on the Sota Pod podcast feed. My other projects, as you know, I'm always talking about fighting both on the ice and in the cage and or the ring. You can check out my second channel, The City Life Project. We're on our way to 15,000 subs. Shout out to everyone who has been supporting this as well. And I just posted a new video of this. There's a new MMA organization, Brett, out there that is doing a draft. It's a team-based format MMA season, which I'm rolling my eyes at because it didn't work like a decade ago, and they're trying again. But they've been signing these guys for their draft, like left, right, and center. And they literally just announced that they signed a dude in prison in Poland. So
it's crazy
story. I talked about it on here. That's the latest video. I do fight preview videos, and I do watch parties as well, covering not only the UFC, but like the French leagues, friggin' boxing, one championship, Korean MMA, the whole 9 yards. So if you're into combat sports, in addition to hockey, check out my channel, The City Life Project. And yeah. Thank you guys. Another great show, Brett. Look at that.
Yeah, hopefully we can talk about some good games coming up. I mean, at this point, it's mainly just Brodin and Johansson that are out. So obviously two still pretty important players, but I think, for the first time in a while, we can feel confident that, hey, this should be a team that can go out and we can expect to win every night. So I'm excited to see what they can do. So I'm excited to watch Kirill Kaprizov play hockey again.
It's about time he's back, baby. It's about time he's back. Well, that's it this week. Thank you guys for listening. Brett, last word always goes to you.
That's it. Go Wild.